So thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you today. I'm Manuela. I'm Brazilian, and my background is in international development. I actually chose this path because I've always been passionate about bringing together people from all over the world to solve big global challenges. And I think that challenges is not something that we are lacking. Actually, on the contrary, we still have a lot of them. So those are what called wicked problems, or as Navi Raju, who wrote the book on frugal innovation called Problems Without Borders. And I'll just mention a few, even though I know you already know many of them, but this is a picture from my home country, Brazil, specifically from São Paulo, where you can definitely see the contrast between rich and poor. So, and the worst part of it is that inequality gap is widening. That's data from Oxfam. And, well, I show a picture of a city, and what we know is that actually will be 10 billion human beings in the planet very soon, and 70% of them living in the cities. We definitely do not yet have infrastructure for it. Especially when we talk about water, there's still 663 million people that lack access to water in the world. And pollution kills 7 million people every day. And also 7 million is the number of hectares that are lost every year. Most of it due to animal agriculture. That's data from FAO. And the consequences of that go from CO2 level increasing, soil infertility, lack of biodiversity, and so on and so forth. So Kate Raworth made this graphic that maybe some of you already know, building on the planetary boundaries, which are those that we were not expected to trespass, but unfortunately we already did in many of the topics. And she added to that the social boundaries that are actually the part inside that we still shortfall. So the idea is that the donut economy, it's to show that we are from one side crossing the ceiling and overshooting what we shouldn't for the planetary boundaries from one side, and from the other lacking behind on what we should for the social perspective. So that's the not so great acceleration that we see. Those are data from Future Earth, and you can see carbon dioxide increasing, ocean acidification increasing, world population increasing without infrastructures, as I mentioned before. And so this is part of my concern. The other part is related to technology. And we've seen that now we're living the fourth industrial revolution, as the World Economic Forum says. Biggest impacts on society. We already might know the Moore's law that shows the increasing on computing capacity. And also, we have already the Carlson curves, which shows that for biotechnology, that's also the case. So DNA sequencing, reading and writing is also increasing super fast. And the same goes for machine learning, blockchain, and many other technologies. So we see these are changing, and we already know how impactful can be technology in our lives. That raises to myself also some concerns that I'll share with you, especially 4 of them. So first, it's the unintended consequences of technology. We see with social media and so on a couple of scandals regarding democracy, regarding filter bubbles and privacy. It also raises concerns regarding the future of work. So how will automation impact society, especially in developing countries such as mine? And obviously not to mention the really bad use of technology for military or other harmful purposes. So the second challenge that I highlight here is the lack of diversity. I contributed to a study with a think tank, a German think tank called Better Place Lab, looking for the digital gap existing in many countries, and it's huge. And the bad side of it is that not only on accessing technology, but also on creating them. And I read this book from Kathy O'Neill, that maybe some of you already read as well, showing the biases that are hidden into the algorithms. And when you have only a certain type of population creating those algorithms, definitely super harmful for society. So we do have people working on that. That's a picture from my friend from Brazil working on integrating more women into tech, but we know that it's still very far below what we should be doing in this topic. The third concern is supply chain. That's a picture that, to me, it's super shocking. I don't know how will you feel about it, but from one side we see how technology is being created and especially from the mining processes, and most of our cell phones have components that come from very bad mining initiatives, especially in Congo, for instance. Coltan is a super important miner for our phones. And on the other side, how it's being dismantled and disposed of. So we see there is a huge issue to be tackled still on this field. And the last one would be hypercentralization. This graphic, I think, talks by itself. The 5 big players on tech nowadays has a market cap which is bigger than many GDPs of nations. And on top of that, we see gigantic funds now being raised, focusing and dominating a huge part of the market. So you might call me a dreamer, but I think I'm not the only one, especially being here in this event where I saw so many people working to change this perspective and change the scenario. And what I feel is that it's still possible to use one acceleration to tackle the other and really do something good with technology, because the impact that it has, it's massive. And especially because now, I mean, since 2015, we already have a sort of a roadmap or a framework that we can use to tackle the global problems. So those are the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN agreed on in 2015. And knowing that, and so trying to do something in this field, I kept on working and trying to gather more information on this potential merge of tech and impact. And one of the things that I did together with an organization called We Share, based in France and in many other countries nowadays in the world, and Open State, which is a German organization, we did a project called POC21, as opposed to COP21, which was a conference of parties in Paris, you know, the one that led to the climate agreement. So we did this proof of concept, that's what POC stands for. That was the 12 projects accelerated in the castle. So we brought together people from all over the world and gave them access to a makerspace in order for them to provide solutions like a solar generator, water filter, and many others, showing that you can have a bottom-up approach that is more decentralized, that is also more effective sometimes, and that can use tech to tackle big problems. And to make it go further and to try to also give more visibility to this field in Brazil, I support the organization of Colabora America, which is one of the big events that happens in Latin America regarding social and digital innovation. And finally, the thing that I'm now working on, and that's like where I want to focus my presentation from now on, is Good Tech Lab. So that's a new project, and it's a venture that's mainly working on 2 key questions. First, how can technology help us solve some of the world's biggest challenges? And second, how is the support ecosystem for people working with tech and impact structured today? What are the opportunities and what are the challenges there? So in order to do so, currently that's a research initiative, we secured some funding with a couple of partners to travel over the globe and interview. Our goal is to have 300 interviews by the end of the research, which will be by September. I've already been to Latin America, Europe a couple of times, just coming out from Asia. A colleague has been to Africa as well, so the idea is really to have a global scope. And what I'll do today is to share some of the findings. I obviously not have time to share everything that I had the chance to learn for the past months, but I can at least spark a bit of your curiosity and invite you to go read the report that will be published by September with all them. And maybe to start, I guess one of the big ideas that came up to me were how many people are already working in this field of tech and impact, and how many examples I could give. I guess here at Republica you already saw a few. I'll just concentrate in 4 sectors today. First, food and agriculture. On agri-tech, we see a lot of examples, especially in Brazil and Latin America, Quilimo, Agrosmart, and many others working with data to reduce water in the planting fields and so on. I'll give just an example of this MIT project, which is this machine learning to produce urban farming. And also, still a sometimes controversial topic is the use of biotechnology to create new types of protein. That's because we know how bad it is, the way that we are consuming meat today, and fish, and so forth. And there are many startups trying to tackle this problem using either plant-based technology or totally synthetic products. Here I give some examples: finless food for fish, or also dairy products without milk. I mean, I have a couple of other examples I can share with you later on. So the second field is like the production and materials. Fashion industry, we sometimes don't think much about it, but it's super polluting. And I have here also a couple of examples of startups tackling that. So Modern Middle, Both Threads, which is working on silk made out from spider, which is actually more sustainable and resistant. And Pili, which is a French startup that produces dyeing from a bacteria. Dyeing industry in fashion is super polluting, again, so that's a big issue to tackle. New materials that can prevent us, or at least make us reduce the use of plastic. So biosourced, biodegradable materials. Here you have the example of Uhu, for instance, which can provide some alternatives for water bottles. Climate and biodiversity, to get to the third topic. And then you have the example of biocarbon engineering, which states the goal of planting 1 billion trees at a time. And with that, help a lot on reforestation. And finally, healthcare and well-being. I have here a couple of examples that I'll mention two of them that are from India, where I was just before coming to Republica. One is sati pads. Those are pads made out of banana fiber, so much more sustainable, and even for the production of them, they're using the women force in order to make it happen. And also eye breast exam, which does breast exam for cancer, which is usually very painful for women, in a much faster, less painful, and easier way to go to rural areas in India, for instance. So, I mean, there are many people doing amazing work using tech for impact, but talking with them and researching a bit on the field, we realized two main things. The first one is that still we need more role models on that, more case studies, more examples. And one of the key issues in order for that to happen is to be able to measure the actual impact that those companies are having. And that's still a very hard thing to do in every sector, but when you are talking about innovation, it might be even harder. And the second thing is that for them to grow, they need a lot of talent, and that's something that is still missing. From one side, because we lack talented people in general, right? So also like supporting more people to go to STEAM areas, have more people getting trained into coding, programming, and so forth. But that's not only that, you know. We also need for the technical people to have the social capacity of understanding what the problems are and how can they use their skills to really solve real problems. To not go just for a techno push, but really to think about problem pool of the solutions. So that's the second big challenge that we face. And then I'll go now for the support ecosystem. That's the second thing that we've been researching. So the first, how can tech provide solutions for big global challenges? The second is, how is this ecosystem structured? What is still lacking in there? So we interviewed more than 200 players from the impact sector and non-impact sector to understand what is happening out there. So investors, accelerators, incubators, some corporates. And we realized that you can have support for your startup, for your company, working with impact all along the way. So maybe before even your company starts, you can make it happen and build it with venture building programs. You can then go to a seed accelerator that will support you with mentorship, sometimes with funding, or even to growth programs when you already have a big company that wants to scale to tackle billion people, have billion customers. Then you can choose the support in order of your vertical as well, so to get the support more customized for you regarding the technology that you're using. Here you have some examples of deep science ventures, which obviously focus on science, but also on industries. Rockstart, for instance, they have programs on food, programs on energy, so it depends a little bit on what's the sector that you're looking at. And even if you prefer not to have the traditional company format and would rather stay for an NGO, there are accelerators working on that. I just spoke recently also in India with this one that supports NGOs to grow. And we saw the different types of value that a startup can get into those programs, the network, the services. This Blue Ridge Labs is a very interesting example of an accelerator that actually provides the company with a design thinking program that can help them talk directly with the beneficiaries and to a focus group community in order to validate their solutions with the beneficiaries instead of just taking it out of the mind and validating the model before going to the market. We can have partnerships, so that was more or less is for the accelerator and incubation part. The other important part of support that usually a company needs is investment. And we see that the traditional way the investment sector is structured nowadays is, we can say at least, problematic, right? So some people are trying to promote more the zebra model for a company instead of the unicorn. Unicorn is the one that needs to grow to achieve billion people, $1 billion, while usually looking much more to the valuation than to the real revenue growth and consumer growth. So there are models that might support that better, especially for companies working for impact. And to be honest, maybe some companies that are working in innovating sectors that will create impacts for society sometimes need to start with different types of capital. For instance, having the grants from foundations or participating on challenges. That's what it's called usually the pioneer gap. So to overcome that, you can get different types of funding, and nowadays there are many types of funding that are available in between, and some more traditional ones that are tweaking also their model in order to adapt and provide the solutions that are the investment that is needed for companies. So Village Capital, for instance, is tweaking a bit the model on the selection process in order to be more diverse, their portfolio. Global Innovation Fund also does different types of investment. Vox Capital put the carry interest conditioned to the impact that their company have, so they will only get an extra benefit if their companies that they are investing on do create an impact. So there you see many adaptations and innovations in the investment model that are also supporting this trend of tech and impact. But still, having all that, how can we really connect this ecosystem, right? It's so broad, there's so many people all over the world working with acceleration, incubation, investment. How do we connect all that? That's still a big question, an open one. And the second question that states, and that would be my big learning as well, is how can we create still new tools to support investment on companies really working to create impact. So, the idea beyond Good Tech Lab is to tackle those issues that I mentioned, impact management for innovation, tackle the shortage of technical challenge, connect international ecosystems, and eventually provide new investment tools. That will probably be my next time here in Republica, telling you what were the outcomes of it. Until then, I invite you to take a look. It will be published in September, our report and the new findings. And in between, I'll be super happy to stay in touch and to reply to questions if you have some. Thank you.